fortunate today that we're very safe. Our South African police services are here to keep us safe and feed our souls as well. They're going to be doing that by helping us sing our national anthem and the AU national anthem, for which I'm going to ask all of us if we can stand. And immediately after the singing of the national anthem, I'll then recognize some of the speakers. I'm leaving it last so that hopefully we can have some of the speakers with us when we acknowledge their presence. But for now, let me first start by acknowledging the presence of Honorable Deputy Minister for Public Service and Administration, Dr. Chana Pilane Majeke, who's here with us. And DG Yoli, I'll recognize you now when after the singing of the national anthem. Now, as we do that, like we ordinarily would do as public servants, we'll recognize the importance of those two anthems by standing up and joining the South African Police Services Choir as they lead us. Yes. So just to clarify, we're going to start with the AU anthem and then sing our South African national anthem afterwards. Thank you very much. So I'll start by recognizing ministers here present, particularly Minister Patel, who we know is here with us. Deputy Minister, Dr. Chana Pilani Majake, Chair of the Public Service Commission, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, DGs present here, and also those that have joined on the online platform. But then our host, specifically DG Yoliswa Makasi, who's also here with us, and various speakers that are part of our program today, including Dr. Mavi Felyun, representatives of the various agencies that may also be here with us or would have joined online. I'll recognize two in particular, the Commissioner of the International Trade Administration Commission, Mr. Ayabonga Kawe, and also the CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Mashimbe, who would have joined online. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to reflect on an important point of progress in the governance of our own continent. And as public servants, we are here to reflect on how we manage our work differently, look at what we do here at home and its implication onto the continent. All of this with a mind to the fact that we've been called to the highest calling that anyone can ever have. That is a calling to build a nation. And we've been called not only to build our own, but to build the continent. And it is for this reason that I think for the 2023 Africa Public Service Week, it is actually very appropriate that we look at the African Continental Free Trade Area and see what it is that we as public servants of the year 2023 would be able to contribute to that as part of the bigger contribution to build our continent, to build our own country, and to also contribute to a better world. So all the speakers that are going to come to the podium would in one way or another be reflecting on that. But for all of us, what is important is that we're looking at this as an opportunity that many don't have, which is opportunities to build their own countries right at the beginning. Many of our counterparts throughout the world come into the economies, sometimes they are called developed economies. They don't have the opportunity to pioneer in the way that we have an opportunity to. And therefore, as those that have been provided this opportunity, we take it very seriously. And I hope that as the various discussions are unfolding, all of us are going to find our own space in making the Africa Continental Free Trade Area work from our various departments with our varying mandates in a way that puts South African flag up there among the rest, but also help South Africa to be the beacon of hope, which it is meant to be in the world, and also a big flag bearer for the entire continent. Now with that, I'm going to ask my colleague, DG Yoliswa Makasi, to come and welcome us today and give us a sense of mission in terms of telling us what it is that we are here for. DG, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. It's a windy day and a cold day, So I wish I was one of those who was connected virtually, who are connected virtually. Maybe I'll be connecting from my bed. But you are welcome first and foremost, and thank you for sacrificing in such a cold weather and joining us here at Birchwood today. Our program director, Ms. Malebu Mabiche Thompson, who is our acting DG at DTIC, Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Ibrahim Patel, I'm told he's around, he's still busy with a meeting. Deputy Minister for the Public Service and Administration, Dr. Chana Pilane Majake. The chairperson of the Public Service Commission, I was informed that he's on the way. It seems he started at another venue, which we subsequently had changed to here in Birchwood. The CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Mashimbe, Commissioner of the International Trade Administration Commission, ITEC, Mr. Ayabonga Chawe, Senior Lecturer and Head of Department of Public Administration and Management at the University of Free State, Dr. Marive Biljon. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Senior colleagues and distinguished public servants who are in attendance today, and our guests in this gathering, Hujambo. This is basically meant to say, how are you in Swahili? Hujambo. So when delivering the budget vote speech on the 16th of May 2023, the Minister for Public Service and Administration reminded us of the call made by the Constitution in the preamble on both public servants and representatives to, and I quote, improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. It is important to know that the potential to be freed is for each person, not just South Africans, each person. I am convinced that this responsibility is what led the first Pan-African Conference of Ministers of Public Administration and of Public Service and Administration when it convened in Morocco in 1994 to resolve that the 23rd of June of every year shall be known as the Africa Public Service Day. The majority of South Africans, and indeed Africans, depend on a functional, effective, and accessible public service, which put Batupile first as the only hope that they have for a meaningful existence. As we bring to life the 2023 APSD theme of acceleration of the African continental free trade area implementation, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the public servants across the continent continue to be innovative in making sure that instruments of the AU are understood and benefit the men and women on all grounds. This can be done only through a functional public service that delivers services in the manner that Africans across the continent can be proud of. As public servants, we should ensure that we use administrative power to remove bureaucratic barriers to trade amongst Africans, to ensure that global conflicts do not negatively affect the daily existence of Africans. This is the contribution we can make to achieve the Africa we want, which is an Africa that has deepened trade amongst its people and is free of poverty, corruption, and violent conflict. As the Vice President for the Southern Africa of the Association of Public Administration and Management, APAM, we will continue to explore measures to also bring this to fruition through a number of collaborative manner that we work. I know that APAM is highly involved in this work, and they will also be exhibiting and participating during the official continental event that will take place in Zimbabwe on the 23rd. The ACFTA demonstrates how working together, African innovation can provide leadership to global challenges. In 2003, the United Nations General Assembly designated June 23 as the United Nations Public Service Day to celebrate the value and virtue of public service to the community. This showcases Africa's potential and leadership of the world. To paraphrase Marianne Williamson's passage, which was quoted by President Nelson Mandela in 1994 at his inauguration, our deepest fear as Africans is that we are powerful beyond measure. Of course, we are paraphrasing the quote. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We have a lot as public servants and Africans to offer the world, and we should ensure that we participate in the UN Public Service Awards in recognition of our continued role in bettering the lives of the people we serve as we collectively free the potential of each person and improve the quality of life of all Africans. Please come in, Dr. Fikeni. You can come in, Dr. Fikeni. I was told to talk until you arrive. So now I can finish up because you are here. Commissioner Tawe, we have a responsibility to simplify the procedures and processes within the administration of ACFTA to ensure that it lives up to its potential. The improvements to the lives of Africans, the silencing of the guns of on the continent, the eradication of corruption, the promotion of people-to-people relations, and the creation of employment requires an efficient and effective system for the administration of international trade. ACFTA is the blueprint and master plan for transforming Africa from multi-generational poverty and underdevelopment into geared-up economic development. Minister and Deputy Minister, throughout my life as a public servant, I have noted that there is no politician that can engage in corrupt activities without an enabling public servant. They will require a willing partner to action that maladministration. For the ACFTA to work, it is incumbent amongst us as public servants to build a capable, ethical, and developmental public service that espouses professionalism in all facets. As we celebrate and recognize public servants across the public service, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Professor Fikeni, it is our commitment to work with the Commission to continue instilling the constitutional values and principles to realize these noble intentions of the ACFTA. In conclusion, Program Director, distinguished participants, and distinguished public servants and guests who are here, I want to wish Team South Africa well for its exhibitions at the Continental Celebration this coming Friday in Victoria Falls in the Republic of Zimbabwe. We are convinced, CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Mashimbe, that we are on the right path towards recognizing great Africans that have dedicated their lives to serve fellow Africans. As I welcome you to this event today, I invite you to ensure that the speeches delivered in these engagements translate into action that can be felt by the African people through innovation, motivating public servants and regarding excellence in the public sector. It doesn't matter what level you are in the public service, whether you are an intern, I'm looking at a few interns from DPSA here, whether you are an intern, whether you are a cleaner, whether you are a DG or a DDG or a chief director or a director or a deputy director, an assistant director, an admin officer, in the different levels that we have in the public service, this is all our work. We all have a role to play, and we must play that role in a manner that ensures that the capacity of our state is not compromised. And the role that we have to play in Africa, we play that role in support to our leadership. So I thank you, colleagues, and I want to say you are all welcome, and thank you for braving the cold winter morning to be here. And those colleagues who are connected online, you are also welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DG, for that. As I had said, that we're going to quickly go through the program in order to make up time. So I will immediately invite Professor Somadoda Fikeni, I hope he's settled down, to then come in and give us some remarks from the Public Service Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director, the Deputy Minister, the DG, and all the invited guests and fellow presenters, and most importantly, to this distinguished audience. I greet you all this morning, Molweni, Dumelang, Sanbonani. Time is it Ndimasiare or is it Ndimachirone? Abshen. First, let's congratulate the Department of Public Service and Administration and all those who organized this event for making sure that we always remind ourselves that as a country we're still part of a greater continent. We are not just an isolated island. Very often during the time of colonialism and apartheid, it was often understood that South Africa was part of the African country only geographically, but its soul was elsewhere. But unfortunately, even after we got our democracy, some people thought that our soul was elsewhere, when in fact we are in Africa. Our fate, our success and failure is inextricably linked with that one of the continent. That is why the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is one of the milestones that we should recognize in these geopolitical changes and shifts that which are taking place right now. Across the world, regions are organizing themselves. North America, Southeast Asia, Europe, Latin America, all of them are organizing themselves, not only in terms of the economic blocks, but because historically they are linked to each other. And our fate in terms of success is very much connected to what is happening in the continent. It is for that reason that first and foremost, Deputy Minister, every one of us should understand and appreciate the African Agenda 2063 and see how we locate ourselves in that space. And it is for that reason that each one of us must also understand all several other African charters which we must comply with. And it is equally for that reason that we must be asking ourselves, how does our public administration assist in us achieving those goals, assist in us in the greater integration of South Africa to the rest of the continent? And it is for that reason that we must also understand that as much as political leaders do map out the agenda, from Kwame Nkrumah to the era of the African Renaissance, to the present period, we must understand that it is our public administration and our institutions that will ultimately be the ones that determine the success or failure of such continental efforts. Therefore, the current reforms of professionalization of public service, the promotion of constitutional values and principles in our public administration, is at the heart of our country projecting itself into the world, into the continent. It is at the heart of us making a success of some of these conventions that we have committed ourselves to, starting with our region, the SADC region, and projecting into the greater continent. The Public Service Commission, therefore, will work closely with our government, especially with the Department of Public Service and Administration, to make sure that we support the efforts of continental integration. The Public Service Commission, Deputy Minister, is in a process of reviving the Forum of Public Service Associations of the African continent. That forum is there, but it was disrupted by the COVID period at the time when Zambia was taking over the rotating presidency. And it is within those forums and several other platforms that we will propagate the issue of building the capacity of our public service in order to support initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Free Trade Agreement, because we are one continent, it is said, that has the greatest reserves of strategic minerals. We are one continent that still have the most unused arable land. And we are one continent that is even supplying some of the labor force as the most youthful continent to the world. Therefore, it is projected that we will have one of the biggest and the growing middle classes and the labor force, and us preparing those in order to make sure that the continent itself and its fortunes are advanced becomes very much important. So the Public Service Commission commits to working towards such goals. But for us to do that, though, we must be anchored in our value systems. We have one amazing philosophy and worldview of Ubuntu Botu, but we have not weaved that into our systems. When we say Batupile, we were in essence referring to the concept of Ubuntu, where the issue of I can never be what I want to be until you are what you want to be, where it refers to the issue of interdependence amongst people. I can never be a success if our neighbors are a failure, where it refers to the issue of human solidarity, where it refers to the ecosystem between humanity and the environment they live around. Beyond the cliche of Ubuntu, you do have a rich philosophy that we ought to weave into our public service. So we stand ready to work with all these different role players to make sure that our public service is authentically African, not by any accident, but by design. Professionalization is part of that, but let's give it an African flavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Fikeni, for reminding us once again of our responsibility. You always hear this thing, you know, we must bring our values, we must bring our values. It's not the buildings that we work in that bring the values, it's us who build, who bring values, and who build systems. So when you hear people talking about administration, they're not talking about anything. It's not the cars, it's not the buildings. We are the administration. And it is us who are the custodian of the culture that we would want those that come after us to carry. So thank you very much for reminding us of that. With this, I'm going to now invite Honorable Deputy Minister, Dr. Chana Pilane. The Deputy Minister is going to give us an address on behalf of the Ministry of the Public Service and Administration. And I do hope that our colleagues online are still following, and if there are any glitches, if you could make that known to us so that we make sure that we continue to also serve you as well. DM?
That's who we are, this beautiful continent of Africa. Program Director, Minister Patel in absentia. I hear he's in the vicinity. AU leaders and diplomatic corps, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, academics here with us this morning, Director General of Public Service and Administration, Yolisa Makasi, and the CEO of Proudly South African, all senior managers from government departments present here with us today, public servants who are here today, senior managers from the ministries, and the participants on the virtual platform. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? And I just love the music. And the music continues to celebrate Africa. Remember, we had our Africa Day on the 25th of May. So as we celebrate, as we identify these beautiful events and occasions that are supposed to help steer Africa forward, we need to do it with the right spirit. Show that we are interested. Show that we are really ready and committed to push forward all processes that will actually bring about Africa's development, something that we yearn for so much as Africans. Aren't we tired of being a dark continent? We're going to take that label one day and throw it away and become a very prosperous Africa. It's all about hope. I wish to welcome you all to the launch of this 10th Africa Public Service Day celebration under the theme, the Year of African Continental Free Trade Area, acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation. Africa Public Service Day is annually celebrated across the African continent to recognize the value and virtue of public service to the people of Africa. The African Continental Free Trade Area, guided trade, as outlined in the theme, shall also in 2023 focus on trade in public service related priority areas, that is tourism, sports, trade and industry, communications, and financial services. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a flagship project of Agenda 2063, aimed at creating a single African market for goods and services facilitated by free movement of persons, capital and investment to deepen economic integration, promote and attain sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development, industrialization, agriculture, food security, and structural transformation for Africa. And structural transformation that is relevant and is beneficial to Africa. Half the time we talk about structural transformation, but find that we keep on talking about policy certainty. Policy certainty that sometimes has got no meaning whatsoever to Africa. Officially launched in January 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Area is the world's largest free trade area, bringing together 55 countries of the African Union and 8 regional economic communities. By removing barriers to trade, the African Continental Free Trade Area stands as a landmark agreement that aims to create a single market for value-added goods and services to promote intra-African trade and attract much-needed investment for Africa. Program Director, my inclination is that if the African Continental Free Trade Agreement fails, Africa fails. and South Africa will also fail. The accelerated implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, highlighted in the African Public Service Day theme, must therefore succeed at all costs. And I'm talking to the people right here in this room. They're supposed to actually understand the role that they're actually going to be playing in making this to be the success it must be. Africa Public Service Day originates from the Conference of African Ministers for Public or Civil Service that was held in Morocco in 1994. This conference agreed that the 23rd June should be celebrated annually as Africa Public Service Day to recognize the value and virtue of public service. Thus, the importance of this week as the Africa Public Service Week. I have been informed that there will be a number of events until the 23rd of June. Program Director, as we celebrate Africa Public Service Day as an annual AU event, entrenched in the AU calendar as a day that recognizes the value and virtue of public service, we must continue to promote awareness of Agenda 2063, which is Africa's blueprint for acceleration of Africa's economic advancement into an active player in global business. Also reflecting on how the African Continental Free Trade Area will enhance sustainable human development, highlighting the role of youth and women in driving the African Continental Free Trade Area. No one must be left behind, and that's why the importance of bringing in youth and women. Also important is reflecting on the capacity of African states to deliver on government priorities, such as this one. Distinguished guests, at present, all indications are that successfully implemented and exploited to its full potential, the Africa Free Trade Area can assist the people of the African continent to overcome a host of economic development challenges experienced by the continent. The accelerated implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area at national, regional, and continental level is crucial for South Africa as it presents us with a unique opportunity to address the governance and development challenges wherever they occur. It is important, Professor Fikeni, for now to really just acknowledge inclusions of issues of governance in this pact that Africa has got, because for it to work, we need to understand that good governance must be in the forefront. Through the benefit of the African Continental Free Trade Area, shared and inclusive economic growth, the 1.3 billion people living in Africa can overcome poverty and inequalities. The World Bank already projects that the successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area can lift over 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty and boost the incomes of 68 million others living in poverty. It further estimates that by eliminating barriers to trade in Africa, the African Continental Free Trade Area will lead to the creation of more decent jobs, sustainable development, and a better quality of life for all citizens of Africa. A realistic dream for Africa, the Africa we want, the prosperous Africa we all aspire for. In line with Section 195(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which provides that public administration must be driven by good governance and high standard of professional ethics. I urge all of the country's 1.2 million public servants, including everybody in this room, to put all hands on deck to make rapid implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area real. Vision 2030, as defined by the National Development Plan, talks to building a capable, ethical, and developmental state that will improve the quality of life for all. Following these principles is but one of the factors considered for making public service a career of choice. Other factors to consider are building professional public service in which unprofessional conduct is never an option to be tolerated. Program Director, to see through this dream, corruption in public service must be decisively dealt with. Corruption is unlawful, erodes trust, undermines development, and creates an uneven playing field that not only drives investors away, but makes free trade, as envisioned by the African Continental Free Trade Area, impossible. We are a government that is viciously fighting corruption at all levels. And I'm sure you will, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, agree with me in this respect, that we are viciously fighting corruption. Corruption is delaying realization of the South African dream. Program Director, the month of June is celebrated in South Africa as Children and Youth Month. It would be amiss of me not to highlight the important role of the youth of 1976 towards total liberation of this country. Today's youth is calling for economic freedom, which we must not ignore. They call it economic freedom in our lifetime. I'm sure you hear the slogan. And truly so, it has to happen for them. The success of the African Continental Free Trade Area will benefit 400 million young people below the age of 35 in Africa, almost a quarter of whom, Dr. Fikeni, are in South Africa due to migration. Thus, the challenge of population explosion to be considered and probably exploited by South Africa's approach to the African Continental Free Trade Area without really condoning illegal migration. For youth to drive the African Continental Free Trade Area, it is important to expand their financial literacy, employment opportunities, and access to capital. Because without capacity, it will just be a pipe dream to talk about youth that would actually be helped to be empowered. And this goes hand in hand with the professionalization of public service framework that we are now really focused on. Program Director, as I conclude, all of us present here today as leaders should exercise our respective positions of authority to support the African Continental Free Trade Area, an Agenda 2063 which collectively seeks to bring about more prosperous South Africa and Africa for us all and for future generations. The legacy we can actually be in the position to leave behind. Every generation must have a legacy that it leaves behind. Africa's governments must build corruption-free, capable, ethical, and developmental states ready to embrace Africa's dream of being united in economic development towards prosperous, independent, and sustainable continent. I wish you all well in all 2023 Public Service Day deliberations. I thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, DM, for that reminder once again. that much as we have to give investors, both domestic and foreign, policy certainty, we do need to give the people of Africa policy certainty. Certainty that there is success, and certainty that they do have a future in this country, in this continent. So thank you for that reminder, and for highlighting to us that implementation of the AFCFTA is actually not an option. It is important that we help migrate our own continent from shipping minerals and then importing cars, taking out very important, valuable minerals out of the ground, making it a continent full of holes, but no jobs. Holes, no hope. And what we want to do with the AFCFTA is that our minerals must be beneficiated here. And we must use the expertise, including of those beneficiation, to deal with the impact of the mining of these minerals here, so that we're not left with holes while the whole world is celebrating what essentially is our wealth. So we thank you, dear, for that reminder. With this, I'm going to ask the South African Police Services Band for a musical item, as we then are going into welcoming Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Ibrahim Patel. So our SAPS colleagues. It's a SAPS. Oh, SAPS was caught off guard. All right, let's do this. I'm just following the program. Even if you can do it from there, I think, if it works.
above. Inward lips are moved by grace, they so sweetly sing. Pray for peace in Africa. From the loving God, tell the love of Jesus by the hills and waters, and God bless Africa and her sons and daughters. Tell the love of Jesus by the hills and waters, and God bless Africa and her sons and daughters.
Thank you very much to the SEPS choir. Oh, I apologize. No wonder you didn't know who I was talking about. The GFG choir. So we thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further delay, I'm going to ask Minister Patel, Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, to come up front to address us on the year of the AFCFTA and also reflect on some of the progress that we've made. Minister Patel.
May I start with a good morning. Good morning to Deputy Minister Pilani, to our Program Director, who's also the Director General of Trade, Industry and Competition, to the other DGs and officials who are present here today. I've been asked to make a few remarks about the African Continental Free Trade Area, and to do it to an audience of public servants in South Africa. And so I thought I would frame it by saying that the AFCFTA, that's the acronym for the African Continental Free Trade Area, is a response to a problem. And the problem is best captured in a few numbers. When we think of ourselves as Africans, we make up 17% of the world's population. 17%. But Africa only produces 3% of the world's wealth, measured by GDP. And we represent less than 1% of global steel production and car production. So I raise those numbers because they explain to us fundamentally what this thing that we call the AFCFTA is about. It's to change that reality. It's to see an opportunity for Africa to grow faster and create more wealth for its people. If I look around the world, I see a world in which big nations are powerful and wealthy, with significant growth rates. And I see on my continent many different countries struggling struggling with jobs, struggling with small business development, and struggling with economic opportunity. And when I look at those big markets, what makes them powerful among many different things is that they have these huge markets. China has a population of 1.5 billion people. When you produce anything, cars, microphones, food, for 1 billion people, you produce it at a much lower price per unit than if you produce it for a small market. And so, if we look at economic history over the last number of years, countries have all tried to make their markets bigger. In Europe, they launched the European Union. It was a program to bring together a continent that is used to fighting each other. And if you look at the number of wars that European countries fought against each other, they tried to change that story, change that history by getting together in a European Union. And that European Union was not just politicians getting together, it's also combining the economies of these separate countries into a massive European economy. They can then draw from that investment, because people look at this massive market and say, I want to have my factory in that market. They can get what economists called economies of scale. You bring your production price down because you're producing for a large market. They can get innovators, young people with fresh and new ideas getting onto that market and, in fact, coming up with innovations, new ways of doing things, new things that they produce. And that's the heart of development, when you can get to the point when you have a market that generates new ideas, new products, what we call innovation, a market that at the same time gives a spur to investors because they know they'll get a return. This market is so big. And a market that is able to bring down the cost of production. Contrast that with us. 55 African countries, some of them tiny, each separate from the other, our own economies, our own political systems, our own infrastructure, often not connecting with each other. And so as Africans, we decided the way to change our trajectory, our destiny, is to take the first steps, and that was to set up the African Union. And the African Union is a political gathering of heads of state with 55 member countries. But that only provides us with an opportunity to talk and decide what to do. It's not the doing, it's the talking about what needs to be done. And so the African Union has been engaged over a number of years on a series of peace and security missions, trying to get African countries to avoid going to war. They've been engaged in a democracy building exercise, avoiding military dictatorships and the overthrow of legitimate governments. And then, of course, the generator kicks in. And they've been involved more recently in an economic project to bring together these different African markets. And what the AFCFTA fundamentally is about is building a single large area where businesses can sell and buy without paying duties, taxes, when goods or services cross a border. And in that way, you're creating a market that is essentially a market of 1.4 billion people. A market that today would be the size almost of China and about close to the size of India. And that in the next 5 or 8 years will overtake both China and India and be the world's largest market by size of population. That's what the AFCFTA is about. And how is it done? It's done by reducing the taxes that we charge each other when we sell goods to another country or we buy goods from another country. It's about removing the restriction that we put in place for services. Services are these intangibles, things that you can't hold in your hand, like phone calls, data, financial transactions. All of these are services. And that's what the AFCFTA is about. It's to make it easy. It's for a firm in one African country to have the whole continent as its market. And underlying this are a couple of policy issues that we believe public servants should be aware of and public servants can work to make successful. So the first public issue that we look at in building this market is ensuring that the objective of this is not for us to buy goods from China or the United States and Germany and sell it to another African country. It's pointless. It's to generate industrialization on the African continent, to get Africa to make more goods here on the continent, often using the raw material that we have. Our gold producing jewelry, our cocoa producing chocolates, our tin producing containers. And yet the reality of our life is that we don't do that. We look to Belgium for chocolates or Switzerland for chocolates. So we will take the raw cocoa, we grow it on the African continent, we export it in raw form to Belgium or Switzerland, and we buy the product back. We'll sell our tin to India and buy back the containers filled with food. And we'll take our gold and we'll sell it to other parts of the world, and we'll buy the jewelry back from them. South African gold, Botswana diamonds, but actually assembled either in India or in Belgium. So Africa does not consume what we produce. We produce raw materials, and we don't produce what we consume. We buy from others what we consume. That's a road to poverty and underdevelopment. And a road out of that is a road that says, let's begin to make things here. But to make things in a country is not simply a policy speech by a president or a minister. Manufacturing, which is what we need to do as Africans, so that we don't buy from other parts of the world, requires a complex ecosystem to function. It means electricity. You saw, had there been no electricity, my ability to have been able to address you in a way that you can all hear right at the back too would have been compromised. But I would have been able to shout, and maybe people at the back may have been able to hear. But if I'm going to make cars on the African continent, I need a regular supply of energy. There's no alternative. It also requires that you have a legal system that functions. That if someone is manufacturing and there's a dispute over the terms between a customer and a supplier, that it can be addressed in an expeditious manner by the legal system of the country. It requires young people with the skills that are needed in advanced manufacturing. If you put together these complex electronic systems in an aircraft, because you want to build aircraft on the continent, or indeed in an advanced piece of electrical machinery, you need young people who don't have only a piece of paper saying engineer, Bachelor of Engineering, but who have that deep insight and knowledge equivalent or better than their counterparts in competitor countries. If Germany makes cars, and if South Africa makes cars, then both of us need to generate young people with the skills that can make the best cars in the world. If German skills is always going to be better than South African skills, then Germany will end up making the cars, and we'll end up buying the cars, of course, if we had the money to buy it. And so I've given you 3 examples of the ecosystem. I've pointed to an infrastructure issue, energy. I've pointed to a critical human infrastructure issue, which is skills development. And I've pointed to a legal system. There are many others in the ecosystem that you need. You need financial markets that work. You need a health system that functions. You need local government that is able to work with foreign investors and domestic investors. And that's where the public sector comes in. The biggest contribution that the public sector can make to accelerating the African continental free trade area is to fix the dysfunctionalities and the problems in delivery. When you have an efficient system, when the public sector works well, it draws investors to a country. It retains investors in the country, those who are already here. And it encourages those who are here to expand their operations. And so our vision as Africans, every head of state has said this, is to industrialize the continent. And the role of the public sector is to build a functioning ecosystem in which each of those elements work. The second area that we've identified as critical is investment. So infrastructure requires investment. We're working now on drawing more investment into the South African economy. President Ramaphosa gave us a target of 1.2 trillion rand over a 5-year period. That 5-year period ended in March this year. At the end of that 5-year period, we were able to announce to the country that we had exceeded our target. We had mobilized 1.5 trillion rand. And the president has now set a new target for the next 5 years of 2 trillion rand. That's an enormous sum of money to raise by way of investment. And when we approach investors, we go to a company, a local company or a global company, and we say, produce more. I just came now from a meeting that I had with a very big beverage player who came here to Birchwood to meet with me in the side room pending this meeting. And they've made a big commitment to invest 6.5 billion rand over a 5-year period. And they came back to me now to say there are some challenges that they're experiencing with getting that investment going. They committed, but the challenge is energy, the challenges are local government that's not keeping to its word, and they've gone into the detail. And so as we try to boost investment, it comes back to that ecosystem that I spoke of, that public ecosystem that needs to function. We're now going out to the world trying to mobilize more resources to be invested on the continent, not just in mining, but in all of the advanced manufacturing and services sectors that creates wealth in modern societies. And again, like industrialization, it needs that functioning ecosystem. The third thing that we've said as African countries we want to do is promote innovation. By innovation, we mean bringing fresh ideas to the economy. Many years ago, this microphone that I'm using would have been here with a wire. I can now remove it from here, and I can walk around on the stage and I can talk to you. Because what they've done is they've removed the wire and they've made it a wireless one. Now that's a small example of an innovation. Everything we do are driven by innovation. The laptop that I was going to use for my remarks, that you're using to record your ideas, your thoughts in word form, the cell phones we use, they're all the products of innovation. So if Africa wants to be a continent that generates enormous levels of wealth and jobs, it must innovate. And the heart of innovation is those institutions, research institutions, universities and others, that takes young people and give them the environment within which they can play with new ideas. Sometimes it's a new product, like this is a wireless microphone. Sometimes it's a new process, the way in which we make this microphone in a factory that can cut costs or provide a better quality. And that innovation is then the key thing that drives economies. Japan is today a wealthy economy. It's got no platinum, no copper, no oil, no gold, no diamonds, no iron ore. It's got none of that. Singapore today is a very wealthy small island with no natural resources. Because the biggest natural resource they use is the thinking and capability of their people. So they've invested heavily, not just in formal education, but in systems of innovation, of introducing the way in which their populations generate the next thing that the world wants. So, as you as public servants reflect on Africa Month and you reflect on the work that we did during May in Africa Month, and you lay the foundation for what you can do, your contribution is vital to the African Continental Free Trade Area and to these triple pillars that we've agreed at continent level is needed to drive the free trade area. Industrialization, investment, and innovation. We've come a long way since the start of the talks on the AFCFTA. We now have 54 countries that have agreed, that signed the formal agreement. 47 of them have now ratified the agreement through their constitutional mechanisms, in the case of South Africa through Parliament. And we've also had a agreement among countries on the rules that must apply to every product that is traded. How do you know it's an African product? What's the minimum African content that it must have? And that too has been agreed for 88% of all the products in our tariff books. That's thousands and thousands of products. More recently, we sat down with Botswana, Namibia, Eswatini, and Lesotho, and we agreed as countries that belong to a customs union, SACU, the Southern African Customs Union, that we are going to put forward a joint proposal on which parts of the SACU market we are going to open up. And we gave them 90% of all the products that countries can trade with each other. It's a very long list, many thousands of items. What will happen now is, as soon as we've done the legal work, we'll publish that in the Government Gazette. And once the clock starts ticking, we begin to reduce our tariffs. Within a 10-year period from 2021, we need to get to zero. So we'll start with a fairly sharp reduction in year one, and then thereafter 10% a year until we get to zero. What it means is the suit that I'm wearing is currently made here in South Africa. It's made by a factory in Cape Town. That factory is able to keep suits from India or China out because there's a big tax on that suit. In future, the tax on the suit coming from another African country will go down. It will reduce. So there's more competition in our market. But equally, we can begin to sell suits in other markets because their tariffs would also have come down in respect of our goods. And that's the heart of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I hope that as we move to the implementation phase, that we will have the support across the state, because this is not a project that the DTIC can run. It is a project that has to be an all-of-government approach, because as I've indicated, it's the full ecosystem that will make our companies competitive and able to utilize the opportunities and avoid the risks. Because with every big project, there are opportunities and there are risks. If we don't get our act together, if we have major challenges in the supply of skills or infrastructure, then another country in the free trade area would be able to sell goods to South African consumers, with the result that those South African businesses will not be able to survive. And that's the nature of these free trade areas. And so it's important for us that we must be able to lift up our game as South Africans, ensure that the full public ecosystem is in place and is able to support the work of the AFC FTA, and that the public sector embraces to a much greater extent this challenge of how to grow South African firms. When we issue visas, when we issue licenses, when we make available water or electricity, when we provide the education that goes into skills development, each of those can be an enormous contribution to building a strong and competitive South African economy. And that becomes the foundation then of our country's entry into the free trade area. For the continent as a whole, we see that the AFC FTA can provide Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Botswana, Lesotho, Mauritius, Madagascar, all African countries, Ethiopia, with an opportunity to grow above the baseline, to grow outside of simply being producers of minerals and oil. And so there's a great excitement on the continent about what can be done. And I hope that in your work as public servants, you can generate that same enthusiasm in your departments for this project, and then work out very practically, very concretely, what it is that each department can do that builds the South African ecosystem, that we go out there, we grow our economy, we grow the number of jobs, and we grow the opportunities for young people. I wish you well in the rest of today's event, and thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts on the AFC FTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Again, for those reminders, we were told that we need to assist in this quest of building people who are capable, and that starts with us being capable to do the work that we are asked to do. Growing firms starts with us being an entrepreneurial public service, where when businesses have problems, we don't throw the rule book at them. We work with them to find solutions, because ultimately we are growing businesses. We're not growing rule books as public servants. Minister said there are economies that are built on people that have fresh ideas. So their biggest contribution to the world is not their minerals or anything, is the ideas that they put in place. And the challenge to us is, how do we facilitate such an economy here in South Africa? And of course, as an important member of the AU and an important part of the continent. Then he mentioned an ecosystem that must be functional. The question to us as public servants is, how do we contribute to that functional ecosystem? How do we challenge rules that don't work for the challenges that we are here to solve? And those are some of the issues that he has left us with as food for thought, as of course the big work to get this big vision of the AFCFTA is continuing. So with that, thank you, Minister, for that. We then go into the second part, or the last part of our agenda, where we are going to have some discussions at a panel level. And before we do that, the Deputy Minister in particular has asked that we do this walkabout that was meant to be done earlier to see some of the exhibitions. And I do know that Minister Patel is pressed for time, so he would be using the opportunity to bid us farewell. And with that, then I'm going to ask whoever is going to be ushering us, helping us to go through the exhibition, and thank, I think, both ministers for the inputs they've already made, and wish Minister Patel a safe trip back to the DTIC. Thank you very much. Who are we following, guys? Ministers, I've just been told that I neglected to indicate that there's a small token of appreciation for the ministers and the various speakers from the DPSA. So over to you, ma'am. Who are we following?
We're following you, right?
another group of people now.
Kulule
Thank you, colleagues. Can we please take our seats again? We're going to start shortly. Is Mr. Eustace Mashimbe in the room? Ah, thanks, please.
Yes, they said to me I must come, I must not worry. I won't be late for my answers.
Let me just chase the last. Donald, don't you want to ask people just to come in, please, that we start? Sorry? Don't you want to just usher people in that we start? It looks empty. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. I wasn't introduced earlier, so for those that don't know me, I'm Marcel Wilson. I'm also working with the DPSA, and I've been asked to just chair this panel discussion that's going to take place. So you can see on the programs that there's a sub-theme, and we're talking about a developmental public administration that creates an enabling environment for investment, value-adding industries to maximize the benefit of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I struggle with that abbreviation. I know Minister Patel was very quick with it, but it's quite a mouthful, the CFTA. But nonetheless, we've got two speakers that will be introducing the topic. First, Mave Biljon, she's a senior lecturer and head of department in public administration and management of the University of Free State, and then also the CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Eustace Mashimbe. There, I've got it wrong now. Anyway, so they'll do a 10-minute input each, more or less, and then we'll open up for questions and answers. Also on the panel, on the Wi-Fi, and Matiki, you're busy monitoring that. Okay, so if you can just keep track of any questions there. So thank you. With no further ado, I would like to ask Dr. Mave Biljon to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Am I audible? Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to acknowledge the Deputy Minister for Public Service and Administration, who is still with us here this afternoon. also the Director General for the Department of Public Service and Administration, as well as the Director General of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, all of the representatives of government, politicians, you as the public administration and the public service, and with that I would like to observe all protocol. An Africa that is sustainable, prosperous, and an Africa with a just and equitable society is built on the pillars of a capable public administration that is developmental. And such a public administration is embedded in a praxis of leading transformative change at an individual, institutional, but more so at societal levels, and is done so in collaboration with various actors, stakeholders, through their activities, policies, and services of government. Public administration as a field of practice includes those activities that you as the public service engage in on a daily basis, such as policy formulation, human resources or resourcing, your financing, your control of function structures, as well as capacities of government, the public sector, and non-profit organization. It is these activities that are fundamental to the existence, as well as the functioning and the role of a capable public service and state that is developmental and who aims to make an impact in society. Similarly, it is also these activities that could be detrimental to achieving the goals of a developmental public service, our government of the day, the state, if it is not managed effectively and efficiently. And in line with the theme of what we are celebrating here today and the commemoration of Africa's Public Service Day, we will not reach those goals if you as the public administration do not manage your activities, your policies, your services effectively and efficiently. The execution of these activities is therefore tantamount of how developmental the public service is and our government. A developmental public service and administration consists of a political and administrative structure with a capacity to deliver services in a manner that goes beyond the mere criteria of a professional bureaucracy that interprets legislation and applies or implements policies. In fact, the public administration in such a public service is expected to be professional, experienced, highly skilled, and motivated, but also goal-directed, and moreover, should have the capacity to fulfill the mandate of government and contribute to a strategic vision that brings about transformative change in society. Further, maintaining high ethical standards and an ethos of public service and administration as enshrined in Chapter 10 of our Constitution that is embedded in principles of Batupele, but also principles of Ubuntu. The expectations of a developmental public administration is high, and I'm sure you will agree with me this afternoon. It is also challenging for you at times, and there's an expectation on you to function in an internal and external environment that is often confronted with vulnerable, uncertain, complex, but also ambiguous circumstances and situations. Your response as the public administration to this VUCA environment ranges from developing progressive policies, eradicating poverty, contributing to poverty upliftment and social upliftment, finding innovative solutions to economic challenges, but also policy responses to economic recessions and global pandemics. ChatGPT succinctly captures these expectations that we as the public have of you, as well as your political principles have of you as part of a public administration that is developmental in terms of three aspects. First of all, you should make an impact on society. Secondly, you should also contribute to promoting economic development and societal change, and you should do all of this, thirdly, with the aim of achieving developmental goals to improve the quality of life for all citizens. And in line and with our commemoration of Africa Public Service Day, such a contribution would be towards improving the quality of life of citizens on the African continent. With this commemoration, this should then be in line with achieving ideals and goals and contributing to social and economic upliftment on the African continent. Developmental public administration therefore focuses on collaborating with other sectors of society to foster economic growth and community development. And what can be concluded in this regard, ladies and gentlemen, is that a developmental public administration cannot be separated from a public service that is developmental. But who is this developmental public administration? And how does it fit into a public service that is developmental? In light of the commemoration of Africa Public Service Day and the theme, the Year of Acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area Implementation, the role of a developmental public administration is to create and facilitate an enabling environment to accelerate the Continental Free Trade Area implementation. Note that I refer to a public administration to distinguish it from the mere activities that defines the field of public and the practice of public administration, but with an emphasis on the developmental role that you, as the public administrators, should play, who execute these activities as mentioned earlier. It's you who are the custodians of a developmental public administration who stays resilient, agile, and responsive in your execution of public administration activities. Against this background, ladies and gentlemen, several strategies and actions could underpin the praxis of a developmental public administration that contributes to achieving the objectives of the free trade area and the agreement. Firstly, consideration of identification and promotion of value-adding and industries who has the potential to contribute to harnessing economic growth as part of your first key steps. Consideration of the role of these key industries that you want to be part and to play a role in this free trade area requires of you to engage them and to make such a role attractive. Your engagement with these industries should also result in outcomes that delineate how these industries see themselves contributing to the free trade area and its framework, as well as the agreement, and the type of support needed and challenges that needs attention and government intervention. Promoting value-adding industries within the AFC-FTA framework is essential for Africa's economic transformation, and therefore encouraging the development of industries that add value, such as raw material, and promote economic diversification can create economic and employment opportunities that drive sustainable economic growth. You should further consider nudging an investment attractive and enabling environment, where you as the public administrators consider how you can contribute to making the investment climate attractive as well as enabling through the right legislation, regulations, policies, but also incentives that is enabling for starting, retaining, and growing businesses. You as the public administration has a unique role to play in simplifying and streamlining bureaucratic processes, reducing paperwork, turnaround time for applications, and minimizing compliance procedures and costs towards such an enabling environment. Thirdly, advancing cross-sectoral and multi-sectoral engagement is critical and necessary for fostering such an enabling environment that is attractive to investment. Your role is to spearhead these cross-sectoral collaborations between the public sector, the private sector, civil society, and other stakeholders towards addressing complex challenges through the principles of social innovation. Fundamental to such a social innovation role is to identify challenges and collaboratively with these stakeholders, also to look at solutions that could identify or address these challenges through collective decision-making processes that promotes transparency and also ensures accountability towards effective implementation of policies, legislations, and the framework of the Free Trade Area Agreement. It is also important that you consider pioneering a policy-making discourse that can be undertaken from a new public governance perspective, embedded in administrative governance, socio-political governance, and public policy governance. What distinguishes this perspective is the opportunity that it gives you as the public administration to co-produce responsive policies by applying co-planning, co-designing, co-delivering, and the co-evaluation of these policies across the respective policy stages, keeping in mind the strategic objectives and outcomes of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and the framework. Second, lastly, monitoring and evaluation for impact. Whatever is undertaken within the framework of this free trade area should be evaluated for impact. Your value-adding industries, as well as your stakeholders, the public and private sector stakeholders and partners, should be part of the process of devising plans that monitor and evaluate the implementation of this particular framework for impact. The real impact should be visible in the positioning of our local economies and local economic development that we find in our South African municipalities. And it is critical that we can see the benefit of this particular African Continental Free Trade framework as well, in terms of how small businesses, local traders, and entrepreneurs capitalize on the opportunities facilitated by this agreement. Lastly, Program Director, expanding Africa's free trade area presents a significant opportunity for investment and economic growth, not only in South Africa, but also in Africa broadly. Through the creation of a single market for goods and services, this particular AFCFTA aims to boost intra-African trade and attract foreign direct investment. It is therefore important that the public administration and the public service that is developmental harmonizes trade policies across our borders, reduce trade barriers, and enhance infrastructure connectivity to maximize the benefits of this free trade area. Program Director, the African Continental Free Trade Area is significant for many reasons, but more so in terms of its impact on poverty alleviation, social and economic upliftment, job creation, local economic development, growing our economies, and alleviating some of the social economic challenges that taint our continent. Therefore, creating an enabling environment for investment and value-adding industries is paramount to Africa's economic growth and development. It is imperative that your focus as the public administration prioritizes infrastructure development, streamline regulatory frameworks, and promote good governance to attract private sector investment. Strengthening our regulatory systems and fostering public-private partnerships and collaborations, but more so leveraging the opportunities presented by the AFCFTA are vital steps towards unlocking South Africa and Africa's economic potential. By working collaboratively and addressing the unique challenges faced, Africa can become a thriving hub of investment through our value-adding industries, collaborations, having the right policies and legislation, and contribute to achieving and improving the well-being of all our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biljon, for that insightful input around public administration, the development orientatedness thereof, and steps that we can take to improve delivery. I am gonna, okay, sorry, I'm gonna hasten then because we're running a little bit behind time, but request then the CEO of Proudly South Africa to give his input as well. Thanks.
Good morning. Firstly, let me acknowledge the Deputy Minister. Good morning, Deputy Minister. The DG of Public Service Administration, as well as the DG of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Thank you, Program Director. As introduced, my name is Eustace Mashimbia, and I'm from Proudly South Africa. So usually I have slides that I utilize for sessions like this, and they usually require me to have half an hour minimum. So in the interest of time, I will pack the slides and I'll talk off the cuff, but try and touch on a lot of those aspects that Minister Patel did not necessarily touch on, because I think the conversations are really aligned, because we are, as an organization, supporting the work of the Department of Trade and Industry insofar as reindustrialization is concerned. So good morning to everyone. All protocol observed, so that I don't miss anyone who's important and I get into trouble. Proudly South African is a buy local campaign. You might have seen the logo many times, because this campaign has been around for the last 21 years, 22. This is 22nd year, in fact, to be exact. And why the campaign was formed was to try and respond to the call made at the time. I mean, the president at the time, in 1998, when the job summit, the first presidential job summit was convened, was President Nelson Mandela. And he had convened the summit with NEDLEC constituencies and social partners to try and come up with interventions to help with the creation of jobs. Because the unemployment problem that we have now was very real then. It was a persistent problem that existed. And so one of the outcomes of that job summit was to create a buy local campaign. Buy local campaigns exist all over the world, and in fact, when the decision was taken in 1998 to form a buy local campaign, the campaign that was looked at and which was utilized to model Proudly South African around was the Australian-made campaign. So people in Australia, when they go out and they make purchasing decisions, they look for the kangaroo, because with them, that is their national symbol. And so that is the symbol utilized on products as well. And they do that because they understand the importance of them buying that which they make themselves. If you look at a country like the US, they even have legislation dating as far back as 1933, where they introduced the first act that spoke to them buying that which is made in the US whenever they make purchasing decisions. For those of you who are fans of cars, like I am, you know that Jeep, Dodge, and Ford are made in Detroit. And in fact, the Americans are quite passionate about the fact that if they buy cars, they're going to first buy cars that are made in the US. And it's because industries like that, like the automotive industry, are labor intensive. And so they have the ability to absorb many people into jobs, and that's why they want those industries to keep growing such that jobs can be created. And so the same applies to us. We have a buy local campaign whose sole intent is to ensure that we educate consumers on the importance of them buying local. We get the public sector through its purchasing decisions to utilize the procurement spend in government to support industries that have the ability to create jobs. The private sector has a big role to play. I mean, if anyone in the private sector wants to ensure that us as customers can keep affording that which they are selling, they need to ensure that they help us create jobs within the economy, and they look at what they buy on a day-to-day basis. And that which they buy should ideally, as best as possible, come from the Republic of South Africa. And so it's important that a campaign like this is supported, especially by those of you who are in the public service. I mean, I can't remember whether it was the DG or the Deputy Minister spoke about the fact that there's 1.2 million civil servants. I did not know that number, DM. Now I know. That's a lot of procurement spent that is in the hands of public servants. In fact, the biggest beneficiaries, the biggest first line of beneficiaries of the tax income that is collected in government are public servants. And so we need to make sure that we support those industries that are able to create jobs, so that people, when they get employed, they're able to then pay taxes, such that those jobs in the civil service can be retained, and government can be in a position that they can, such that they can pay the salaries and that which relates to the conditions of service to public servants. But most importantly, so that government has enough at its disposal to be able to render services to the masses of this country. We have a population of about 60 million or thereabout, but with an unemployment rate standing at 32.9. Look at China, 1.5 billion, the minister said this morning. But the unemployment rate always hovers between 2 to 5. I know now there's an uproar in China because for the first time, Professor Fikeni, for the first time they are at 5.5%. And it's a big problem for them, especially because it affects the youth. And so we have a responsibility. If a country that has 1.5 billion people is able to create jobs, such that their unemployment levels are at that level, it means we can also do it. But like the minister said, I think this agreement is very important in that there is a market that exists on the continent. And if you then utilize the market in South Africa to start building up industries, because we will be buying from those companies, and those industries can then grow on the back of the markets that will exist, or that exist all over the continent, that will be accessed as a result of this agreement. Imagine how many jobs will be created in South Africa. And we are regarded as the most industrialized economy on the continent. And so we have to take up that position that we have now, use it to our benefit. The fact that we stand to benefit more than anyone else at this point in time from this agreement that says products that are made in Africa can access other markets in Africa without attracting duties and tariffs and those kind of things. And so it's important that it starts here. No one will come and invest in South Africa, says that they can create jobs if they don't have a belief that someone is going to buy from them. Whether you're a domestic investor or an international investor, you will only invest in any business, no matter big or small, if you know that that which you're going to produce or the service you're going to render is going to be bought by those who are in a position to can buy. And that is the thinking behind Palo South African, is that we get those who make products to be supported, such that they can retain the jobs they have, and as a result of increased demand, because we'll be buying those products, they can then create new additional jobs. And that is the thinking. So our appeal to public servants across the country is utilize your procurement spend. The minister spoke about his suit this morning, and it starts there. I'll speak about my suit. In fact, we as Palo South African are the reason why the president a few years ago started talking about the fact that at SONA, the State of the Nation address, his suit is made in South Africa. We sent a letter to him. And we saw that the letter was not being responded to, so we went and we met with his advisor, with his economic advisor at the time, and we unpacked the need for him to lead in ensuring that South Africans understand that whatever it is that they need to wear on a day-to-day basis can be sourced in South Africa. And that's the only way that we're going to build up that industry. That is probably the most labor-intensive industry in terms of its ability to employ women and the youth. And if you look at the unemployment numbers, the most affected, when you look at those unemployment numbers, are the youth and black African women especially. And so support the clothing industry. I'm just using them as an example. Support that industry. Because those factories, those CTMs that manufacture those clothing items have the ability to employ breadwinners. We know that in most instances that one job that the person has at a factory is probably is the only source of income for that household. Might be the only person working in that home, and so that is what we are calling for. I'm going to conclude in the interest of time by introducing an ad, and I've asked the gentleman to play it for me. But before they play it, I want to tell you what the thinking is behind that campaign. So in 2020, at the height of COVID, when we were all in lockdown, we came up with a campaign as Palace of Ken where we said, you know, the economy was already in trouble. Even before we got to the pandemic, the economy was in trouble. We had already encountered the highest levels of unemployment since the introduction of the quarterly labor force survey. We were downgraded by all rating agencies. You know, we were already in a recession. So anything and everything that could have possibly gone wrong at the time had already gone wrong. And so when we went through that period of a lockdown and the economy was closed in the way that it was closed, we saw it as an opportunity to pause. So the campaign is called Game Time because we use the analogy of a football match. You know that if you're not doing well in the first half, you know, if you're a soccer fan like me, if you're not doing well in the first half, at halftime, the coach has to come with different tactics, bring in new players if they have to, so that in the second half, the team does well and performs better. And so it's the same thinking that we are saying that period where the economy closed up was like half time. We needed to pause. But as the economy started opening up and continues to open up, it's an opportunity for us to do things differently. So this is the second half, in our view. And the one big thing that we all do, that we can still do to contribute to the growth of the economy and the creation of jobs, is to be mindful of where the product you are buying comes from. If you buy a furniture item as a department that comes from China, you've created jobs for the 1.5 billion people in China. Whereas there are factories in South Africa that create furniture. There are factories that create furniture in South Africa, but also buy their nuts and bolts, and their glue, and their leather items, and their cloth in South Africa. So when you buy an item made in South Africa, you're not only supporting the factory that makes the furniture item, but everyone across that whole value chain. So there are many other factories and many beneficiaries. And we know that if you go and create jobs, like I said, in some of these households, that one salary takes for 5 to 6 people. So think about it. The next time there's a procurement decision that must be made in the public service, and it favors a product that comes from outside of South Africa, we have effectively created jobs in that economy. And so that is what the campaign is about, and it concludes by asking you to consider the kind of economy you want to pass on to the next generation. We can mess up this economy, give people tenders and procurement opportunities and allow them to import the items. But it kills the economy. It puts more and more people out of jobs. We all know someone who's unemployed. They're in our homes, they're in our churches, they are where we live, where we spend our times, where we socialize. They're there. What contribution are we going to make? But more than anything else, what kind of economy are we going to pass on to the next generation? And that is what the campaign is about. So I'm going to ask the gentleman to play the ad. If you can please play the ad for me, and I'll then avail myself for the next 10 minutes to take questions. Thank you very much.
When I started my business, all I wanted was to create jobs and a legacy for the next generation, because I see opportunity when others see impossibility.
It all started with a thought and then a seed in the garden, which grew into my very own farm that feeds the whole nation daily.
Cotton silk and a little bit of treasure. I create masterpieces that give South Africans an identity, comfort and confidence, because when you look good, you feel good.
From the factory workers to the warehouse and then over the seas, which grew into my very own farm that feeds the whole nation daily. It all started with just some ink on paper and inspiration to bring people together. With my furniture, I now help create spaces that are beautiful, comfortable, and authentic to human life. And
because when you look good, you feel good.
I've always been driven by curiosity. From the factory workers to the warehouse and then over the seas, which possibility and the beauty of South African looks like.
I was born into a rainbow nation. My life has been full of colors and many people together. And when I started my career, I wanted to share the legacy of the world and show South African people together.
And because when you look at it,
All I ever
I've
dreamt
always
of
been
was to
driven by
meet a bird and
curiosity.
fly
From the
high.
factory
And
workers
now
to the warehouse and the
dream
seller of the groceries, I was possible to very own proudly South African organization daily. I started to make it just something my life has been full of colors to bring people together. And when I started my mouth, I was to trust, loyalty, and appreciation. And most importantly,
All I ever
I
dreamt
built
of
this
was to
little
meet a
local
bird and
business
fly
as the
high.
factory workers to the warehouse and the seller of the groceries.
South Africa,
Their
future is in your hands. So what are you going to do about it? Be proudly South African. Bond locally to bring jobs and trust, loyalty, and appreciation.
All I ever dreamt of was to meet a bird.
I think that was a great ad. I believe very myself as well that we definitely need to buy South African as far as we can. Let's try and avoid all these fancy stuff from over the seas. We've got fancy stuff ourselves. Thank you, colleagues. We've got about 15 minutes. Unfortunately, we pressed for time, and I know the CEO as well has got another appointment at past. And I'm going to be a bit different from usual, and I'm going to open first for the online questions. Matiki, if there's any, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Also, perhaps when we open for questions, just say whom it is for and stick to the point, please. Be very specific about the question, that we don't have long inputs from the floor. But share your ideas. Do feel free to share. Matiki, are you ready with it? Please.
We've got Precious Kananda on the platform. You can go ahead.
Precious, please.
It's a piso.
Okay. Tsepiso, can you hear us? Okay, there is a bit of a problem, it seems. Let's go to the floor then first, and then we open up here, and if you can perhaps try and sort the problem, then we can open up for the online people as well. Any hands? Prof, please. There's one. DG. Okay, let's take those 2 then, Professor, and then DG, please.
Thank you very much for this great input. With the proudly South African encouragement of manufacturing and buying local, I wonder if there is any attempt to coordinate, because we're spending already more than 200 billion on social grants. But that money never circulates within the community. We also have feeding schemes in schools. That's money already being spent. Just to say, how do we make sure that it influences local? And several other things, wool, goat skins, cattle skins, which are being slaughtered every weekend. Are we able to retain that raw material that is already there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then DG.
Thank you. I have one question per panelist. I just want to confirm that I just want to ask the CEO for Proudly South African, what does it mean when I see a logo, a Proudly South African logo, in a product that I may be interested to buy? Does it mean that from a quality perspective, the product is also has gone through some quality management, or review from your side. I'm always interested in this in respect to Buy South African. The second comment or question goes to our honorable doctor, and I just want. So we always talk, and I hear you in your speeches where you're talking about public servants not being just enforcers of rules, but so don't throw the rule book to people when you're providing services. In this case, it would be your economic-related services. And I'm just interested in this because, and I fully agree with that approach that we should not be throwing the rule book. But again, you would know that public administration, how things are structured is that actually the public servant doesn't have authority to change the rule book. So whilst you are calling, I mean, I've listened to the speakers, and I know my deputy minister is an issue she raises all the time. When you throw the rule book to her, she's like, change the rule book. But public administration, it's not easy. Officials cannot change the rule book. An official cannot take a decision and say, this legislation is not working for me, and therefore I'm changing it. There's particular processes that you have to follow, and changing legislation, you will not spend less than 3 years just on changing the legislation. So what innovative practices could be put in place that enable the officials to do the work and be able to handle rules that are making it impossible to do the work, but still not find themselves in trouble of having changed the rules and not complying with legislation, not complying with regulations, and etc. So for me, that's a big gray area. I think it's easy to say, change the rule book, but the processes of changing the rule book. And you know, just briefly, I'm talking about this from experience. I've been in DPSA for 3 years now, 2020. I started in 2020 in March, just before COVID. And I sometimes listen at my political principals, generally in the public service, and everybody very frustrated about the public service regulations because they constrain certain things that need to be done and processes, especially around recruitment. And so I was in a meeting, I think last week, with a former minister and my current minister. And the former minister charges at me and says, but you've been in the department for 3 years, you have not changed these regulations. And you know, I didn't respond, but it made me think that perhaps the minister does not understand what it takes to change regulations and the type of work that we have had to do in the background for us to even be able to publish, to gazette the regulations, and what happens after gazetting the regulations before you can actually bring in new regulations. So how do we navigate that space, and how do we innovate around that space? Again, knowing that regulations, I mean, legislation, it's very difficult to innovate because you can't change a legislation until you go back to Parliament to change it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Unfortunately, we're struggling to get the online questions, but perhaps we can ask the online people if there's a burning question in the chat, perhaps. If you can type it up there, we can ask Matiki to read it if there's anything in the chat. But in the meantime then, if you're able to do that, I want to ask, is there any further questions from the floor here? I also see on the system there's no open questions. So I'm going to hand over to the panelists then. First CEO, because unfortunately we have to excuse him as well, and then I'm going to come to Doctor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And apologies that after responding to these questions, I have to leave. I have a board meeting starting at 1:30, so apologies that I have to leave. The first question from Professor Fikeni is, I think, is an important one, in that we have to look at the cumulative spend in the public sector. And in fact, one of my many slides talks about how you can aggregate demand in the country for the benefit of certain industries, and I even have case studies on the furniture industry. And so it's important that we get support from the public sector in terms of not only mobilizing spend that accrues to the beneficiaries of the grants, but also the spend from individual government entities themselves, including state-owned companies. And so that is part of the program of Proudly South African, is to aggregate demand in the public sector, but also in the private sector, to make sure that if there's money being spent and there's a product being bought in the country and we know capacity exists, we try and utilize that for the benefit of those industries that will be able to employ some of our people. The other question, Prof, was around, how do we ensure that things like goat skins, etc., with the slaughtering that happens on a weekly basis is utilized. One of my slides, which talks about the value chains involved in the furniture industry, is about how natural hides and skins and fibers are utilized by the furniture industry. In fact, by the clothing and textile industry, to convert those into leather and textile items that are then utilized by the furniture industry to make furniture items. So I have a slide that shows the value chain. And the intention behind that slide is to show that nothing that is available to us is waste. In fact, we are able to create jobs through multiple ways, as long as there's a market that exists. And so all of that is part of the work that we are doing with the private sector in ensuring that their raw materials are sourced locally. And it starts with all of those items that we know become available to us on a weekly basis. And I think my response then to the question from the DG touches on that last part of my statement, in that DG, it's a pity that I'm rushing and I did not have time to showcase what it takes for any company to utilize the Proudly SA logo as you know it. But we do look at two most important things, is that every time you come across a product that has the Proudly South African logo, you know that it has gone through a vetting process and it's locally made. We check for local content. So are the raw materials sourced locally? So as best as possible, you have to ensure that as a producer of products, that which you utilize to manufacture the product is sourced in South Africa, so that you create jobs across the value chains, like I said initially. The second thing that we look at is whether it's of a high quality nature. So quality is very important. In fact, the Proudly South African logo is made up of the colors of the flag of the Republic of South Africa, telling you that the product is made in South Africa. But then there's that tick. That tick tells you as a consumer instantly that you can trust this product. It's of high quality nature. There's this perception that things that are made in South Africa are either expensive or the quality is not right. It's not true. If you come across a product and you look at the country of origin label and it says made in South Africa and has the Proudly South African logo, you can trust that it's made in South Africa, so it's creating jobs in the economy, but that the quality is right and will satisfy the need for which you are buying the product. And so those are the first two. The other two are softer issues that we look at when we evaluate companies who join us is, are they complying with the labor legislation of the country? Because we want companies who affiliate with us to comply with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and treat their workers fairly. And lastly, which is, talks to the question from Professor Fikeni, is that are they helping us meet our environmental targets? So are they recycling and reusing waste as best as possible in all of their production processes? And so that talks to all of that waste that comes from slaughtering, etc., that will then benefit the economy of the country. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. If I may be excused, I have to attend a meeting. Thank you very much. Good luck with the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, it seems like there is an online question as well. So Matiki, if you, sorry, CEO, your memory stick is still there. Matiki, is there a question that you can read to us that's possibly applicable to Dr. Biljon? And thank you. There's a small gift as well.
It's from Tumelo. It says, are there any mechanism in place at the moment to monitor and evaluate the extent to which the African Continental Free Trade is implemented as a way to try and gauge its impact?
I think that might be a bit not fair on Doctor, but if there's somebody from DTI or DTTC that can perhaps look at that question, they want to know the impact that the African Continental Free Trade is implemented and a way to gauge its impact. I don't know if there's somebody that's willing from the audience here. There's an answer. After Dr. Biljon, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, and thank you, DG, for that question. I don't think my intention is to say that the public administrator should, break the laws or not comply with policies. I think we would both agree on that. I myself have a background in the public sector, so I have worked for the public sector. And I do understand that there's an expectation on you and on the public service to be innovative and come up with solutions to the myriad of challenges that you face on a daily basis in terms of delivering on policies, delivering services, etc. And the environment in which you function does not always allow you to do something that's maybe out of the box or innovative, because how you execute your roles and your responsibilities and delivers on the mandate of government must be in line with your legislative parameters, the legislative framework provided, your policies and your procedures. So I do recognize that, DG. Yeah, but I think it starts with recognizing and looking at what are the stumbling blocks. If we see challenges, for example, we now have, or you now have as the public service and as the administration, a very tall order in terms of this Africa Free Trade Area, its implementation, and to go and identify what are going to be some of our barriers to facilitate this, to implement it effectively and efficiently, and to make sure that we get the investment that we want as a country, but also in turn, we get the investment that will grow the economy and that will help us achieve the objectives and the goals of this particular African free continental or the free trade area and its implementation. And to highlight and to pinpoint those type of, if I can call them policy challenges, or stumbling blocks or barriers in your policy environment or your procedures or your legislative frameworks. And to try and see how there could be a way to facilitate some form of reforms around those type of challenges. So the intention is not go and, do things that are not in line with the legislative mandate and the framework that you are provided with. But I would say a starting point is, if we want to achieve this Africa continental free trade area and the benefits that we want to see from it, then we have to start with identifying what are some of our challenges and what could be some of our responses to it, and where is it that we have to start in terms of whether it's policy reforms or reforms in terms of public administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Biljon. Then we can ask there at the back if you can just introduce yourself, please, and thank you for the willingness to take the question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Furiel from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and I'm responsible for the AFCFTA work program at the department. Just in terms of evaluating and monitoring the implementation of the AFCFTA, you'll recall that Minister Patel earlier indicated that recently we finalized the SACU tariff offer, so those list of products that we would be starting with liberalization. So as much as the implementation of the agreement or preferential trade started in January 2021, there's only a few number of member states or state parties that have actually concluded, number one, the tariff offers on the 90%. And once you've concluded that, you have a process of domesticating your tariff schedules, and that's where South African SACU is now. So out of those 44 member states that have already finalized and approved tariff offers, a number of them are still busy domesticating their tariff offers. So we expect that this could be done by September. And then we will start implementing preferential trade. And that's just one aspect of the agreement, which is trading goods. At the moment, we have about 8 member states that are actually starting to trade preferentially. And even those member states have started on a limited number of products. So this speaks to some of the challenges that you've mentioned. There's going to be issues with customs, other non-tariff barriers, logistics, transport. So when you look at the AFCFTA, you need to look at it as a holistic and very comprehensive agreement. So as we're entering now the real implementation phase of the AFCFTA, what that entails the establishment of a national implementation agency, which we're busy, we're in the process of doing it through the DTIC. And of course, it would involve a number of departments and stakeholders. We're trying to finalize a very targeted strategy to look at where our export interests lie. So that's part of the plan as well. We're undertaking a number of awareness workshops to really get South African private sector ready to take advantage of the new AFCFTA markets. But quite importantly, when you look at the AFCFTA, there's a number of protocols or areas of the AFCFTA that we're still in the process of negotiating. So investment is still being finalized, IPR, intellectual property rights is still being finalized. We in the process of finalizing the negotiations of women and youth in trade protocol, a digital trade protocol. So all of that will be part of finalizing the negotiations and part of the monitoring and evaluation aspects. But the real impact will be seen slowly now in the beginning. And as we really start implementing all the areas of the AFCFTA and tackling those challenges that emerge, if you can imagine, it's 55 countries. It's the most comprehensive agreement we've ever negotiated as a continent. The real impact will probably be seen in the next few years to come.
Thank you once again for the willingness to answer that question. I still wish I can say that abbreviation that quickly. AFCFTA. It's hard on the tongue for me. But thank you very much. Colleagues, that's the end then of our panel discussion on this topic, and I want to thank the speakers for that. And Lefuno, I'm sure you've also got a gift, small gift for Dr. Bill John. And what we're also going to do then is just ask the choir for that last item. Are you ready for one? Please, if we just do one item, and whilst you're taking the stage, I'm going to ask DDG Vukela, who is the Deputy Director General for Government Services Access and Improvement, to do the vote of thanks and closure. Thank you very much. Lefuno as well. Thank you.
Uingo
Thank you very much, Program Director of the panelists, Marcel Wilson. Colleagues, delegates, my name is Willie Vukela. I'm here to just make a vote of thanks. Just to appreciate every speaker. We had a very wonderful day, I must say. Starting to acknowledge the Program Director of the session, Mema Lebo Babiche, Thompson, DG DTI, who did a wonderful job. She gave an overview of the importance of this day today. That was followed by the welcoming remarks and the purpose of why we are here by the host, DG Mema Kasi. Thank you very much, DG. We had a word of appreciation. I think when he started to present his remarks, Dr. Fikeni, he first acknowledged the DPSA to say, we thank you, DPSA, for arranging this type of events. This discourse is quite important to make us understand who we are as Africans. We really appreciate the chair of the PSC on your ongoing support of the work of the department. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And therefore, what came very important from what the chair indicated is that we must locate our work within all agendas of the AU. Your Agenda 2063 and the 2030. That defines the work of the African Union. We appreciate that. I want to appreciate the remarks of the day made by the Honorable Deputy Minister, Dr. Chana Machake Pilani, who gave us a wonderful speech outlining the linkage of the AFTA with the APSD. This area agreement, how does it link with today's work? I think we take the leave of what the Deputy Minister raised. What is important was that she made a very good analogy in terms of the music, that Africa, when she's happy, she thinks. When Africa is sad, also sings. So Africa, we are always sing every time. So we really appreciate the word given by Honorable Minister Patel, the host of the content of AFTA. I think he made it initiative to say the AFTA is a solution to respond to something. He said this agreement brought it about with the view of bringing together African business. Fragmentation as we are, but let's build a very big scale of economy for all Africans. We appreciate that, Minister Patel. And therefore, we take to account the two panelists today, Dr. Merve Bill-John from University of Free State and Mr. Mashimye from Proudly South African. I think what the doctor raised, she spoke about the development of public service on the progressive policy and legislation. In realizing the aspiration of the AFTA and remove all the bottlenecks, we take note of that, Dr. Bill-John, and what Mr. Mashimbe raised. He spoke passionately about industrialization and procurement processes. I think we're here, we'll see what we do as different public servants for different ministries to begin to implement the discourse to ensure that this area agreement becomes a reality. Lastly, just to thank all the hardworking men and women who are public servants, who are here, and those who have joined virtually. And we thank to the police band who gave our national anthems this morning, and the GPG choir, we salute you. This discourse is a clear indication that Africa does not need strong men and women. This area agreement, it says, as Africa, we don't need strong men and women, but we need strong systems and processes. In that way, we want to say from the DPSA as the host, we are all welcomed in terms of going forward. It's going to be a week-long discourse. As the DJs indicated, we're going to end in Zimbabwe. We're off to Zimbabwe on the 23rd, which is Friday, for Continental. Tomorrow we're in UJ. You are all invited. Asante sana, ndatenda, na kensa, kyalebuwa, ndolibuwa, shukran. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the closing remarks. There is now lunch served outside. Leah will lead the way here with a, is it khaki that you're wearing, Leah? I'm not very good with colors, but she'll lead the way, but it's past the toilets on that side of the building. We also requested that the DPSA staff please just remain behind. There's a little bit of work we need to do before we go for our lunch. Thanks. Thank you very much.